Welcome to the Life Leadership Podcast with myself, Leila Singh, all things coaching, career, and personal branding. This podcast is for ambitious career professionals like you, wanting to create a life of choice and freedom, to be, do, and have more through overcoming limitations, to develop new perspectives and insights, and to redefine your success, be that in work, health, relationships, and so much more. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Harpreet Singh. Harpreet is a highly accomplished and multifaceted business management professional with over 10 years of success and history in driving rapid business growth and exceeding $1 million business targets at companies including Amazon, Nestle, Sony, Samsung, and his current employer, Tech Startup. He has a strong background in leadership, stakeholder management, and devising and implementing business growth strategies. Throughout his career, Harpreet has demonstrated the ability to take on bigger challenges, and he strongly believes in working backwards from customer needs and building long-term, mutually beneficial relationships with strategic partners. In today's episode, Harpreet shares with us what it takes to transition from a Fortune 500 company to working at a startup, and the key differences in experience and exposure between the two. He also shares, with change being a constant, what we can do to effectively adapt, what goes into a product launch and go-to-market strategy, leveraging his own experience from one of the world's largest tech multinationals. He also shares his international exposure and associated challenges and the core skills that he has honed to enable both business growth and his own career acceleration. So let's head over and hear what Harpreet has to say. Harpreet, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great for you joining us. Thank you so much, and welcome to Life Leadership podcast, all about leaders like yourself and what you've done in your journey, and to share with us, some of the challenges you've overcome and just some great insights that can benefit our audience. So I'll dive straight into the first question. I would like you to share with me what your experience has been going from a global corporate Fortune 500 companies that you've worked for to working in a startup. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show, and I really appreciate that. So I think it's quite a journey for me when I see myself transitioning from global 500 companies to a lesser known recent few years startup that I recently joined 2 years back roughly. So I would say it's challenging, but at the same time, you need the right mindset, right? So when you look at large organizations, your swim lines are defined and you know what you have to do and you do your job, right? So that's one of the key things when you join as a marketing manager, you're doing marketing manager for that firm, or that you're doing that function. And that function entails whatever the goals that you have, and you impact those goals. But I think the mind shift that was required to adapt to a new startup or a smaller team, which is less than 20 people, I had to do a reset. Now I will be responsible for more broader things, though I was taking care of only account management initially when I joined the startup, but then the role evolved into how do we expand internationally, and how do we grow the business. So I think that is what is very different than when you join a large organization. You get lost in kind of ocean, but when you're in a startup, your actions are more visible and your impact is high. So I think that's the difference of what I found between working between the two different setups altogether. One which like 100,000 plus employees, and now with 20 or less people. So I think that is what really shifted for me. When I have to look at professionally, I had to really set my adjustments internally, that okay, now you're responsible for much broader things, right? You are kind of wearing different hats in any given day. So that's challenging at the same. That's challenging, but at the same time, it's also very engaging because now you know that, okay, you are picking up new things, right? So which keeps your mind engaged. So that's what I would say, that it's been engaging and a full learning experience for me, moving from large corporation to a smaller startup.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, so tell me a little bit there, because that's really interesting. You know, you talked about a couple of things I picked up there actually is much higher visibility, much higher impact in a startup, broader responsibility, whereas you can almost get lost in a larger, like a Fortune 500. As you talk about the swim lanes, that's just brought back memories there. You know, you have your responsibility and that's what you do. You don't necessarily get involved in the bigger picture. What you do may not be as impactful. So tell me, how did you adapt?
So I think the mindset shift that is required to adapt is that this is my new role. Like acceptance is the first thing, right?
Mm.
Because most of the people don't get that hey, I've worked for large corporation and now this is a smaller setup. And sometimes, and I think for us, for me at least, I feel that having that change was somewhere ingrained in me, that when I worked for Amazon, I worked in different teams. There was a culture of fail fast, do things, try different things. So I think it got ingrained from there. And even while doing other jobs at other Fortune 500 companies, I always kept an open mindset that what's there to learn. So I think that eagerness to learn and curiosity to try new things is what has kept me going so far. And that's where I think uh, many people don't see that as a value add, but I see a lot of value add, because change is the only constant in life, because that you don't know what is being thrown at you, while you are in your journey. But if you are able to adapt and execute based on whatever skills you have acquired over time, I think that is what has helped me successfully um, do various roles, change different countries, change from large corporations to smaller corporations.
Okay, that's really great to understand that. So if one of our audience was thinking, okay, I want to actually transition across, what would you say are the maybe two or three kind of key transferable skills that they should be looking to acquire or to hone and develop in order to create that smooth transition?
So yeah, thank you. Great question. So I think, as I said earlier, that first thing is acceptance that this role is going to be different, right? So if you are setting the right expectation in your mind and saying that, okay, this is what I'm going to, and this is the new transition, and my primary objective is to learn and do things differently. So I think that's the very foundational thing that one has to do. And then second thing one has to do is make a list of what are the transferable skills I bring to the table. So, hey, I'm good at stakeholder management. Hey, I'm good at relationship management. I'm good at, whatever XYZ your three set of things are. And then try to match that to what is expected out of your next role. Because I think the other thing is that now, like for and I'll give you my example, because I'm now working with the CEO, day in, day out,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm exposed to various things. And for example, fundraising was never part of my journey anywhere, but now I'm helping them fundraise as well. So that is the open mindset, knowing what your strengths are and what transferable skills you
Mm-hmm.
can adapt to, keeping that fungibility in mind. You should be able to transition to a newer role without a problem. But if you are having a fixed mindset, no, this is what I've done, I don't, and I'm scared to try new things, that is where I think it might not lead to a good experience or a fruitful learning experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Great advice there. I will say that, Harpreet. Thank you. So
No
tell me
problem.
then, and you kind of alluded to some of this already, but what does it really take to handle change and challenge?
um So again, starting with the same theory that the change is the only thing that is going to happen in your life, like irrespective of wherever you are, how successful you are, or wherever, whichever the part of the journey you are. So keeping that in mind really helps, right? And having, and the second part to this is having belief in yourself, because most of the time we start doubting ourselves, and many people doubt themselves because of the circumstances or whatever, things change around them. So change is only constant, and I believe I can do it. If I don't know how to do it, I learn how to do it.
Hmm.
Right. So that if you go with those three kind of principles into a new role, into a new job, or wherever you want to go, I think you will sail through. I mean, with flying colors or not, that will depend on various other factors, but it will it will essentially keep you sane.
Yeah, yeah. And just on the point you said about learning, so being open to learn new things. Um, I have always been of the view that particularly if you start a new job or a new company, it's fine to ask for help, ask to understand, and so forth. What's your view on that?
So it's, I think, depending on which organization, the culture, you have to first understand the culture of the organization, right? And then adapt, right? So you need to know what you need to ask for. So if there are certain skills that you are expected to learn on your own as an, professional, as an individual, you should do that. That's part of the adult learning, right? No one will handhold you and get you through the door, right? But there are some things where you think, for example, let's take an example. So for example, when I came here, uh, my interaction with developers in my previous organization, software developers, was not that much. But now, when I'm dealing with developers and they are kind of my internal customers, I need to know what language they speak, what tools they use. And if I'm not asking for help, I'm essentially setting myself for failure, right? So if one has to sell himself or herself for success, they or he or she should ask for help for what tools are required, right? Obviously you'll have to learn bit by yourself, you'll have to ask for help, but you should categorize that, hey, these are the skills that I need, these are the tools I need, and this, for these tools I need help. And so, let's say for example, someone is transitioning into a manager role from an IC role, right? So can they have mentors? Like when I did that, like I did, when I transitioned to people management role, I was mentored by someone who was managing like 100 plus employees, right? So that's what few that those are the few things that you can do to have a easy transition.
Yeah, yeah. And again, good advice. And part of the reason I asked it is because I've had people before in conversation who've said to me, well, join a new company, but I don't want to ask for help because I'd be seen as not knowing or being a bit of a failure. And I think my view is that when you go into a new role, you want to have a proportion of that role which is new, which is going to be a challenge because that's the growth that comes in.
Yeah.
Therefore, even if it's a similar role to what you did in the previous company, this company might do it completely differently. You need to still ask and seek to understand, as you said, to be a success in the role.
Yeah. So you have to view yourself that for you to be successful, what is required
Mm.
and what is doable. Like you categorize into different buckets, like say that what is required for me to be successful at this role. There are skills that are on me, and then there are tools and skills that are outside.
Yeah.
So many a times we don't differentiate between the two, and we keep randomly asking people that, hey, can you help me, let's say for example, draft an email, which is which is fine in certain circumstances, but you don't need to do that, right?
Mm.
So if you know that, hey, in my example, that if I had to learn Jira as a product for which I have to communicate with software developers, and how to write those tickets, how to read those tickets, how to track progress, all of that. So that is something which I can ask help for because I don't have a background. And no question is a stupid question, in my opinion,
Mm.
right? Because
Yeah.
what we hold ourselves to that, if I ask, I may look stupid, but
Mm.
you have to, it's a new role, it's a new company. uh, you should take the risk of being looking stupid one time, then setting yourself for failure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you for sharing that. So tell me a little bit about product launches and routes to market that you've worked on.
Sure. So I think at Amazon, my first role was to launch Amazon devices in India. Um, and I think it's part of the go-to-market strategy. How do you want to, reach out to the customers? Because now you have a product. How that product reaches the customer? So there are multiple ways. That Amazon.in was one way where people can buy online, but the other was the offline retail channel, which I was responsible for. And the way I did there was that we did it in piecemeal basis. So I mean, if I step back and now look back at that time with Amazon money, they could have said, you know, go ahead and do whatever is required to get the devices in hand of every individual that's out there. But I think Amazon is a very data-driven company, and they encourage you to test things and then go out. So my strategy was to pick, retailers first, and then once these big box retailers are in, then go to distributors, then like essentially filtering out and creating a playbook. So what is the right playbook for launching any product? You need to understand who your customer is, right? And where your customer is shopping, right? So once you do that, once you understand that, then it's you can easily replicate that across different geographies. So let's say we picked up only metro towns initially. Then once we did metro towns, we said, okay, this is the playbook that we have built for here. We know, in what locality, what kind of customer, what is the customer persona that we are serving. We've developed all of that as as our launch plan. We moved then to the second tier town. Okay, in second tier town, test with smaller subset of stores, not go everywhere, and then learn from there, and then move to the next. So that's how it was done in different stages, and the business did really well in 3.5 years I was there.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me then, during that time in that role that you're in, what are the let's say 2 or 3 things that like you really enjoyed about it, that kind of
Yeah.
inspired you, motivated you to do what you were doing?
Yeah. So I think the real professional satisfaction, I would say, I saw there that AS, the business grew from, like, I think $2 million in the first year to, I think, 100 million plus business in 3 years. So the other thing is that e-reader market was not there in India. There was no e-reader available in India, and we kind of created that market, right? And when we initially we were launching, we were looking at the reports from eMarketer and other Forrester, like the market research agencies, and they were like that as per their best estimate, the market was around $2 million, right? But I think with the right strategy, with the right marketing, with the right product, we proved everything wrong, what was there, right? So I think that really gave me satisfaction that yes, a product was taken from launch to from a not launch state to a launch state, and then really doing well, and that kind of paved way for other products as well, which was like Fire TV, Amazon Echo, which came afterwards. So yeah.
And so if somebody was considering a career path involving product launches, what would you say are um the kind of core activities that they would be getting involved in day to day, like the sort of, again, top 2 or 3 things?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is doing your market research right, right? Understand where your market is, where you want to go, which is your customer, where do you want to launch. And let's say in our case, we don't know that, right? That's why we took the approach of doing it, learning it by doing it, right? So that's what we did because nothing existed before. But if you're launching a product that's already there, you need to understand where the market is. And when I say that where the market is, like who's your customer, what is the total addressable market, what is the addressable market that your competition has captured, and what you want to target, uh, what is the pricing that you want to target. All of that you do beforehand, and then once you decide that this is where you want to go, like you want to target a particular physical geography, which kind of customers you have, what kind of supply chain you would require to address that market. So all of that is required for you when you're thinking of launching a market, you're launching a new product in the market. You need to think about all those things beforehand so that once you go in, you are accurate in your estimates. Obviously, how the customers react when you go larger into the market, then it's a separate ball game. You collect customer feedback, then you change on that, and then essentially, and we also did that because I think when we launched, we found that there are a lot of non-English speakers. So our content team worked on curating content for Hindi titles and like other Indian titles, right? So that's what is required after the launch. But before the launch, if you are launching a product that's already there, study competition, study the geography, study the channels which you want to launch in. You want to launch online, offline. So there are so many things to be considered when today if you're trying to launch the product which already exists. So you should do your homework well before deciding to launch.
Yeah. And just listening to what you said there, I think it almost sounds like if you're somebody who's got a real passion for technology, for the industry, this is a great role to
Yeah,
consider because it's really getting to grips, really getting into the detail of understanding the markets, as you say, the competition, the addressable markets, customer habits, needs, and so forth.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Sounds really, really, really exciting. And is that similar to what you're doing now in terms of obviously you have a broader role now, but is there an overlap there?
So it is partially applicable because now I'm essentially trying to figure out how can we explore US market for the startup. So I'm doing currently at a market research stage. So what I'm currently doing is I've already kind of concluded in terms of what we want to do next. So what essentially we are trying to do is um, identify what is the total addressable market for us.
Mm.
Um, that I've done, we found that it is roughly $3 billion overall market for us if you look at the product space that we're in. Second, we have looked at where we can sell. The entry to barrier is low in terms of data privacy. Like, for example, California is a great state to be in, but we are not going there because data privacy regulations want data to be sitting in data centers in the US. So we want to go to states which are, let's say, Florida, Atlanta, which are still data regulated, but they're not. If it's still if the data is sitting in North American mainland, so they're okay. So that's what I've done. That I've broken down that the market share of the total addressable market by state. That this is the estimated market by state, and now the conclusion is that we'll be targeting most likely Florida and Atlanta, which are like roughly $700 million target market for us. So
Right.
that's what I'm doing currently.
Yeah. So I can see there the kind of transition from you created the playbook when you've
Yes.
done this previously with a Fortune 500 to now go into a startup and transfer that process, shall I say, the process as well as your skills of having done that already
Yeah,
into a smaller company, right? So
absolutely.
there's a lot of value to be had there between the two. So I like that. And tell me, you've had a fair amount of international exposure. So share with me a little bit about that and how you've adapted in that instance.
Yeah, so I started my career back in India. My first role was with Nestle, then I moved to Sony, then Samsung, and then Amazon. So these are the four companies that, like, five Fortune 500 companies I've worked with, and through Amazon I moved to States. Uh, Culturally, I think there was a culture shock. The way things were done in India and way things are approached here, especially in the North America, are different. And that is one thing which, having that curious to learn and adapting to new places um, helped me that, and it has helped me thrice actually. Now I've done it India to US and US to Canada. So I think that has really worked well for me. But yes, it's definitely someone is thinking of moving internationally. It's going to be a cultural shock in terms both in not only in terms of you know how do you drive, how do you shop. It's going to be very different, and one very peculiar example which I think I we laugh about with my wife is like, when I went shopping initially for buying a bread in a supermarket store in India, I would say either a white bread or a brown bread, like two or three certain categories. And this is the first time me standing in front of the bread aisle, and they're like, at least I think, if I'm not wrong, 150 options to choose from. And which is like, which to it could cause you like, what, like, why there are so many options. But that's how things are. And then you, over time, you kind of adapt to that. Okay, this is how the new things are. So you get acclimatized essentially to
Mm.
new way of things. But yes, uh, if you, again, coming to the same point, that if you are having a fixed mindset that this is how it was done earlier, and this is how I have lived earlier, um, you might be in for a shock,
Yeah, yeah,
and survival might be tough then. But if you have openness and if you have willingness to learn, I think irrespective of whatever place you go to, uh, you will find your way to success.
yeah. And so tell me then, what would you say is the biggest cultural difference or differences in India and then going to the US from a work perspective?
Yeah, so back in India, I think one very peculiar difference is that in India, people go for a lot of breaks during the day, during their work day. And these are
Mhm.
chai breaks, wherein they go and chat about work, besides work. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of camaraderie that builds with these chai trips, I would say, right? Because you go out, you speak to people, and speak to colleagues, you build a bond, right? But whereas I think in the West, or at least in the US, people are like, come to work, um, go to meetings, and they have few breaks only. Like, I don't see people hanging out having, water cooler chats a lot. But there are there, but not compared to what, you know, I was used to in India, right? Because there it was more frequent, and many things get resolved. But when you go and hang out with colleagues and discuss work matters, but here it's more of a email culture, that if you want to get things done, draft it out, send it over email, and ask yourself before setting up any meeting if meeting is really required or not, right? Because there you're like, yeah, we want to set up this meeting and we want to discuss this, brainstorm it. But here, because people are busy with their lives, they want their time to be utilized effectively. So I think that's the biggest change I saw in
Mhm.
the workplace.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, we hear about the water cooler conversation. It's kind of an American term, right?
Yeah.
And I believe personally there is power in that, in
Oh,
in
absolutely.
having those conversations. And as you said, in India, where it was more informal, you can actually get a lot done in those conversations. And I
Yeah.
think now, obviously, with the pandemic and the impact of that, and not everyone's going back to the office, I think there's a lot of that will be lost.
Yes.
Just from as simple as just building relationships to then getting things done in the workplace can potentially become more difficult because you haven't got that connection, you haven't had those conversations. And I know, for myself, being when I was back in the corporate space, that was a way of, for me, it really helped towards getting the job done and knowing who to go to for things and having the right connections when you needed to accomplish something,
Yeah.
or just some knowledge. It's like you can pick up all sorts of information just from that so-called water cooler conversation. Or
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those are important. But again, I think pandemic has changed a lot of things in the world, right?
Mm.
Uh, I don't think so. 2 or 3 years ago, any big company, imagined that remote work is possible, right? Right. Everyone has to be in office, right? And now, while people, companies are trying to get back to office, but we can see resistance everywhere because now people have, uh, and having lived in big cities, people have saved 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours of office commute,
Yeah.
which is a great value add in anyone's life because office commute sucks and no one likes it. But
Mm.
everyone had to do it because you are required in office. But that's, I think, that's changing, so it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's adapting, as you said earlier, isn't it? Being open to adapt. And I still think there's value to being in the office, even if it's once a week or once every couple of weeks,
I
organizing
think,
with people to be in.
yeah, I think hybrid is the real way to go,
Mm.
my opinion, because it gives you the flexibility. But again, if when you want to build relationships in the office, uh, sometimes if people get hundreds of email, it can easily get lost in your mailbox, and it might you need a decision from someone, and someone is not responding. So that's where I think I find that going to someone's desk, hey, I've sent you this email, and he or she quickly reads it. We go a couple of questions back and forth, done,
Yeah.
right? That could have taken a couple of days, and that has taken a couple of days when it comes to remote working.
Mm.
And you'll have to wait for other person to respond because he is dealing with his priority list, and you're trying to get your work done. So yeah, that becomes a challenge. But I hope most companies adapt hybrid work, and I think should be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree with that. And so tell me a bit about the broader transferable skills that you've acquired during your career, because you worked in different industries as well. So how has that evolved over time?
Yes. So I think if I have to, stack rank the skills that I have acquired, I think one is relationship management, because my roles have been mostly partner facing roles, both inward and outward. Um, so when I'm dealing with with an account or large corporations, I have to deal with their CEOs, CFOs, category teams, um, and even the store people on the store front as well. So the relationship management is very important, right? That is where I think that is one skill that I would say that's number one skill that is important when you are in these kind of roles. You need to know how to communicate, and communication is this important part of that relationship management. How do you communicate with ease with a CEO, CFO, or a shop floor sales guy, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how do you communicate, and you don't build those relationships with those people, it could be a challenging role for anyone. And I think second thing is stakeholder management, and especially true when it comes to you know who is the right decision maker, for which whom you should go to, and who are the right stakeholders for, if you have to get the work done, who are the right stakeholders for that, right? um, and that's also very important in my view, because it gives you a sense of prioritization. Like you could let's say, for example, if you're trying to do your work and you are trying to figure out how things to be done, and many a times it happens that if you go to the right person, it might your time to do that work can reduce drastically, right? So knowing that for what thing to whom we should go to, I think that's the another skill I would say that I've acquired. And then my most role have been like revenue generation roles, right? So uh, in that aspect, knowing about business, right? How the business works, how we make profit, how companies make profit, what are the profit loss statements, and how do you uh, generate profit or revenue through mutually beneficial relationships. So that kind of leads to that, because if if the relationship is not profitable for both the partners, then it will not survive, because you're in the business. It's not a personal thing. It's a business which you are doing. uh, you have a business and the other counterpart also has a business, and if it's not mutually beneficial, it won't work. So I think those three things I will consolidate. Had a lot of other elements as well, but broadly these things are required to have a fair good understanding of, for anyone to be successful.
Yeah, yeah. Harpreet, thank you for sharing that. And let me ask you one last thing. What's next for you?
Yeah, so I'm currently helping the startup to get the fund raise and probably launch their product in the US. And if I'm able to do that, we are waiting for the funds. So if that happens, I think I'll be essentially expanding their business to the US market. So that's what I'm looking forward to right now.
Great. So exciting times ahead for you then.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We've had good couple of investor meetings, and I hope that by next month we should able to net something. And if we are able to do that, I think we'll be all blazing guns in the US.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing that journey unfold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Harpreet, thank you so much for joining me in conversation today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you. Thanks, Leela.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already done so. And if you enjoyed and gained value from today's episode, then do please leave a review telling us your key learnings and what you enjoyed the most. And do please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can spread the word on life leadership, creating a life of choice, freedom, and new possibilities. Connect with me directly on LinkedIn, and if you would like to learn more about how we can work together, either DM me on LinkedIn or email me. All details and resources can be found in the show notes.